Russia has invaded the Ukraine. I don't give a damn what Russia says they have done. This is not some kind of invasion. It's an invasion. Now, I'm going to break down some elements of this invasion and the Russia-Ukraine conflict that I think has not been proclaimed enough. Now, let me first take you to the story of them invading the Ukraine. Here it is.
The Russian government has ordered the evacuation of all embassy staff here in Kyiv as soon as possible, in yet another worrying indication of what may be a wider war on the way.
In a national address tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a decree calling up military reservists to face off against the threat from Russia. President Putin may not have declared his intention to invade Ukraine, but he's dropping plenty of hints and demands, repeating tonight that the best resolution to the crisis is for Ukraine to drop its aims to join NATO and international recognition that Crimea is part of Russia. Ukrainians agree that the Russian invasion is already underway, with the Russian parliament giving Putin the green light to use military force outside the country. The fighting in the east could trigger a full-scale invasion. The mood in the capital is more subdued than normal tonight.
All the people around me, they're worried. They're like, oh my God, we're going to die or something, but I'm okay.
Tonight, Ukrainians are staring down the barrel of a gun, and the only hope they have is that new sanctions will stop Vladimir Putin from pulling the trigger, a strategy that has not worked so far.
All right, go to the next video.
The president also warning Vladimir Putin that if he continues his aggression, there's even more punishment that can be inflicted, not with soldiers, but with more sanctions. In a ceremonial move today, the Russian Duma, that's the nation's parliament, gave President Putin permission to use military force outside the country. Just as these new satellite images just in show that troop deployments are now within 12 miles from Ukraine's border. Well, today's action sent markets into a free fall, with all three major indexes falling more than 1% and sending the S&P into correction territory. Well, tonight we have two reports from inside Ukraine, and in a minute we'll get analysis from our own Margaret Brennan. Plus, but first, we're going to start with CBS's Weijia Zhang, who joins us from the White House. Good evening, Weijia.
Good evening to you, Nora. Tonight, the White House says that the sanctions imposed today are only the sharp edge of the full pain the U.S. is prepared to inflict. President Biden emphasized that if Vladimir Putin escalates, so will he. But he also stressed that it comes at a cost: higher energy prices for Americans here at home. Today, President Biden warned Vladimir Putin was laying the groundwork to launch a large-scale incursion into Ukraine.
This is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Putin's decision to send troops into two Moscow-backed breakaway regions of Ukraine while recognizing their independence has deepened the crisis.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law.
Okay, let me break this down. Number one, I'm anti-war. People believe, they believe that somehow war is a necessity. If you believe war is a necessity in this country or any other, you have already been indoctrinated to a false framework. War is not a necessity. War is an expression of a sentiment. It's violent, it's chaotic, it's bad, not a necessity. Let me give you some background to the Ukraine. The question is, why is the Kremlin doing this? Well, there's the front leading proclamation, which is for the security of Russia, due to the potential alliance with NATO becoming a NATO member nation. If that happens, according to Vladimir's theory, then there's this barrier of a Western alliance that simply cannot be on his watch. That's the front-leaning proclamation. There's another one not so pronounced. What does the Ukraine have worthy of discussion? The Ukraine, besides having an abundance of natural gas, is loaded with minerals like coal, iron, titanium, and other non-metallic raw materials. It's the leading country when it comes to reserves of iron, titanium, and non-metallic raw materials. Make no mistake about it, COVID-19 significantly damaged the markets of export and import, raw materials, the ability to get your hands on them. It has contributed to increased inflation, not only in America, but other countries. There's always a front-leaning proclamation for war. But believe me, there's not just one variable for why a country decides to go to war. There are many. Story gets deeper. On June 12th, 2020, the Ukraine joined NATO's Enhanced Opportunity Partner Program, okay? This is not a member nation. They joined a program, a subcommittee, if you would. According to an official NATO statement, the new status does not prejudge any decisions on NATO membership, okay? Now, here's what I'm going to do. Remember, NATO has said this alliance with the Ukraine does not prejudge a potential membership into NATO. That's what NATO said, right? Go back to Joe Biden's words.
Let me be clear. These are totally defensive moves on our part. We have no intention of fighting Russia. We want to send an unmistakable message, though, that the United States, together with our allies, will defend every inch of NATO territory and abide by the commitments we made to NATO.
He said they will defend NATO territory, but the Ukraine is not NATO, unless you have already prejudged Ukraine to be a de facto NATO nation, which, by the way, would make, ironically, Vladimir Putin right, which I don't want him to be right. I don't like him. Story gets deeper. Ukraine announced plans Wednesday to declare a state of emergency as the nation prepared to defend itself from an accepted Russian invasion and fought off a new wave of cyber attacks that hit the Ukrainian government and banking websites. Now, I will say this, war is bad. It's bad domestically, it's bad internationally. It takes out the humanity of things. Dr. King said it best when he opposed the Vietnam War. He made it very clear. He said, listen, anytime there's international war and America is involved, domestic issues that are important to us right here in the homeland, people are desensitized to them. They do not create remedy and solution for the domestic policies that we're fighting for. I agree with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his words. The 30-day state of emergency, subject to approval by Parliament, would impose curfews and restrict mass gatherings in certain regions, if necessary, to confront increased Russian aggression. The chief of the National Security and Defense Council said, and I quote, "It follows a call up of reservists as Ukraine braces for Russian President Vladimir Putin's next moves." There is no reason to believe that Putin will not continue this territorial takeover. I'm going to get into that as well. Many Republicans, which is interesting, they're saying, well, we really don't care. I'm going to deal with that in a minute. Reacting to the first wave of US sanctions after Russian troops deployed into two pro-Moscow separatist regions of eastern Ukraine, Russia warned that Americans will fully feel the consequences. President Biden has acknowledged that the crisis would lead to higher gasoline prices, while US businesses have been warned to prepare for possible cyber attacks. Well, really, we've been under cyber attack by Russia for over 10 years at least. Do you think that Vladimir Putin feels empowered because, I don't know, maybe we have allowed him to get away with everything anyway? Just a thought. All right, so Pope Francis said Wednesday that the prospect of war in Ukraine caused great pain in my heart and condemned the actions destabilizing coexistence among nations and discrediting international law. Government and banking websites in Ukraine came under renewed cyber attack Wednesday, but cyber protection agencies are fighting back, the Ukrainian government said. The Ukrainian president Zelensky announced Tuesday night that he was calling up the country's military reservists after Russian lawmakers voted to give Putin the authority to send troops into eastern Ukraine. Now, here's what Putin is saying. Putin is now declaring that regions of the Ukraine are actually independent nations from the Ukraine. So he has unilaterally decided that parts of the Ukraine are not actually parts of the Ukraine. They are sovereign nations under his theory of why he's entering into these spaces, okay? Ridiculous, I know. Putin's decision Monday to recognize the breakaway territories as independent and ordered the deployment of peacekeeping forces. They're led to the US to impose an initial round of sanctions, targeting 2 regions on Monday. So what are these sanctions? By way of executive order. Tuesday's sanctions come after Germany ceased certification of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, moving to limit Russia's future access to European energy markets. The European Union and United Kingdom also announced additional measures taking aim at Russia earlier Tuesday. Hey guys, you all have done this before, it didn't work then, okay? The new financial penalties from the Biden administration target key Russian institutions, as well as 5 members of Putin's inner circle. We will call those his homies, all right? Biden said they share in the corrupt games of the Kremlin policies and should share in his pain as well. That's actually a pretty smart move by Biden. Now, Republicans are literally saying we need to invade Canada. Yeah, Candace always has it. Some others echo this. They put it in writing. We need to invade Canada to stop the truck convoy, anti-government, whatever. They want the convoy. They simply want to stop the government from stopping the convoy, right? Which is full of white supremacists. So they want to protect white supremacists in Canada. They want American troops to go to Canada, invade Canada. But when it comes to the Ukraine, they're saying things like, it belonged to Russia anyway. Well, that's not really factually how it happened. So let me give you background to that. The Ukrainian SSR was a founding member of the Soviet Union in 1922. The country regained its independence in 1991, following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Now, the fact that Republicans are saying, hey, it's cool, Russia can go ahead, they can get that back if they want to, used to belong to them anyway, is like saying Mexico should go back and get Texas. I'm sure that if anyone made that kind of proclamation, America would have a problem with it. Remember, although Mexico's War of Independence pushed out Spain in 1821, Texas did not remain a Mexican possession for long. It became its own country called the Republic of Texas from 1836 until it agreed to join the United States in 1845. 16 years later, it left the United States with 10 other states to form the Confederacy, and then we beat them and got them back. War is bad. All right, Mr. Mayor, I know it's a lot here. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I agree with you. You're making a lot of sense, Dr. Richey, especially around, look, it can be tough, I know, for us in America to judge Ukraine, Russia. Here's what I think is important. What Russia is trying to do is a threat to all nations who have thrown off the yoke of imperialism and colonialism. And it is ringing alarm bells, not just throughout Europe, but also throughout Latin America and Africa. Nations that have cast away oppressive regimes, that have struck out on courses of independence. If nations like Russia can decide, well, 40 years ago, you used to be part of a federation with us, you used to be part of an alliance, you used to be under our thumb, and it is now strategic for you to be again, so we can, as you said, invade at will, and the international community's response is not going to be strong enough to stop us. Well, that is a threat, not just to the 40 million people who live in the Ukraine, but to billions of people around the globe. And I think you're exactly right too about what Russia's intentions are and why the modern day American Republican Party is cozying up to the Republicans. First, it's because they intend to get a stranglehold on fossil fuel production and choke Western Europe, the rest of Europe, economically, and gaining hold of Ukraine will help them do that. But also because Russia hates the same folks that the modern day conservative movement does. Vladimir Putin believes that the only proper thing to be is a white male Christian conservative, and that everybody else is to some degree a little bit less human than that.
Yeah, very well said.